Welcome to Business Time Live with Boffin Consultancy. My name is Mags Boland-Murphy, and today we are going to speak a little bit about something a little bit more personal for women in the workplace, women in general, women in Ireland, women in the world. So this is not really purely about business, but it is definitely related to business and related to females in the workplace to a certain degree. We are going to talk about the menopause and perimenopause and what it means for women at work and what it means for women in life and their poor, misfortunate families and hubbies and all that jazz around that as well. To kick it off, I'd like to introduce you to two lovely ladies, the first of which is Kathleen Kinsella. Kathleen is a leading specialist, a menopause specialist, and she provides fantastic services all over the country to businesses who want to support their female workforce in terms of the menopause and also all stages to go with that. Kathleen is qualified and she's aligned with the Royal College of Surgeons. She's a former nurse. So Kathleen, welcome. And on the second seat, we have a lovely lady, powerhouse lady, Audrey Gaffney from Taylor and Wolff, who has kindly agreed to have this discussion, and we'll have a bit of crack as well about our own journey. Okay, ladies, thank you for joining me and welcome. How are you all keeping today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for inviting me, Mags. I think it's a very important topic. I'm not sure how qualified I am to be talking about it other than from a personal point of view.
Oh, that's qualification enough, Audrey, I can tell you. And Kathleen, how are you keeping?
Yeah, keeping well. Just to say that as well as having all the qualifications and all the rest of it, but I've also been through the personal journey as well. So and that will inform what we discuss as well. So I not only have learned about it, but I've been in those shoes too. So
I think it's fair to say we have to have two things when we're going through this: information and a sense of humor. Because you know, if you don't laugh, you'll cry some days with this. But Kathleen, I'd like to kick it off with yourself, if I may, and just, I suppose, ask you about your own story a little bit, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Are you talking about my menopause journey or how I got to be where I am? Yeah, my menopause journey. Yeah. Well, I have to say, considering since I started doing this training and all the rest of it, I consider myself to be reasonably lucky with my journey. I have heard some absolutely heartbreaking and horrific stories from women as part of the work that I do. But my own journey wasn't too bad at all. But having said that, there was a lot of things that happened to me in that perimenopause area and time that I had no clue was anything to do with menopause. And even though I come from a medical background, I still had no clue. So I was looking out for the normal symptoms, like which would be the hot flushes, changes with the periods, and possibly being on a shorter fuse than normal. But you could write that down to anything, really, couldn't you? So so I look back on that journey and see I had joint pain that I thought I was getting arthritis. I couldn't remember a thing, and I thought I was getting Alzheimer's, and unfortunately my mum has that, so that was going to be quite a concern for us as we get older. And then I also had recurrent urinary tract infections, and that were really bringing me to my knees, and that turned out all to be now perimenopause symptoms that were part of my journey. So that's why it's important to have that knowledge, you know, because certainly when it came to the urinary tract infections, I was investigated from both a urology and a renal point of view for the recurrent infections, and I was treated consistently with antibiotics that I actually turned out I didn't need. I would have needed a whole other different type of treatment, and that treatment left me quite debilitated, you know, in that sense. So and a complete misdiagnosis there as well, you know. So for my journey now, as I said, being postmenopausal and now and have been for many years, I'm very happy to say that my journey was good. I've settled well into the postmenopausal stage of my life now as well. Still have the brain fog, get a little bit of the joint pain still, thankfully the urinary tract infections are gone, and so I'm just settling nicely into the next stage of my life, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can identify with a lot of what you mentioned actually, Kathleen. And you know something, I always look at things with a little bit of humor.
Yeah.
But like that, I had this joint pain that I said, Jesus, I'm not that old. I'm not falling asunder, I hope. And of course I'm mistaken it for arthritis. And this unbelievable exhaustion and tiredness, which I'd only ever experienced when I was pregnant.
Yeah.
At the same level. So there is that, and that short fuse piece, which I suppose maybe my husband would say, I have that anyway, regardless of menopause. But you do start to wonder, what the hell is wrong with me? So that I can identify with a lot of that. Audrey, how are you? How did you get on with your little journey, or how are you getting on with your little journey?
Well, I suppose I'm still trying to figure a lot of it out. For me, it all kind of like started that being self-employed doesn't help when you become pregnant. You know, maternity leave, I have no idea what that means. And I think I handed my daughter over to my husband the day that I got out of hospital and arrived home, and got straight stuck back into work. And it was in 2016 that I discovered that, and it wouldn't be a great one to go to the doctor unless I was missing a limb nearly. So they discovered I had a fibroid, and it was fine. It was manageable. We'll do various different things, and one of it was to put in a coil, but that was kind of like that's what we will eventually do. But of course, the years kind of roll on, and at this stage now, my complaint was having very heavy periods. So coughing, sneezing, laughing would be a concern during a full week of very heavy periods. And like I remember being on site and my kind of briefcase bag tilted over and a tampon rolled out, and I was there thinking to myself, thank God that's what rolled out, because I had a spare change of clothes everywhere just in case. So COVID happened, and I had an appointment to go the Christmas of 2019. I think it was the 8th of December actually was what it was. But it was for 6 o'clock in the evening, and I have a small kid. My husband works in emergency services. I had nowhere to hand her over, and I said, look, I'll defer it, and I'll get a new appointment sent out to me that hopefully will be midday, and I'll be able to manage it. And I rang them and cancelled it, and they were to send me out a new date. COVID, of course, happened then after Christmas. And I kind of went, well, no hospital's taking anybody, so I leave it. And when I rang them again on it, they went, oh, you cancelled that, but that was it. It was cancelled. Got myself back into the books of it, went in again to have my consultation. They decided then at this stage that they were going to try and put the coil in, and we tried all of that. That wasn't going to happen on it. Such a painful experience. It was actually nearly worse than giving birth. And for my doctor to sit down with me and say, look, you're not having any more kids. You're in your 40s. We would advise that it's a hysterectomy that you go for. At this stage, they reckoned that the fibroid would be the size of an orange. So I went, okay. They did further. I remember driving home that day. I was driving out from Holles Street, and I've driven that route so many times. I ended up, I think, in Finglas, and I went, how the hell did I get here? I was like, and I kept repeating it, I'm having a hysterectomy. I am having a hysterectomy. It was like I was trying to get it in many ways I could say it. I was trying to get it into my head. That was all fine. What I suppose the heel of the hunt of that was that a next examination they went, actually, we think it's more of a melon that you're having, or sorry, a melon. It turned out that when I did eventually get the operation, which was November of the following year, that I was the equivalent of being 20 weeks pregnant. So they left my ovaries in the hope that that wouldn't bring on the menopause. But I suppose what had happened shocked my system into, and it brought it on. And I was delighted with myself for the first couple of months. No period to worry about. This was great. And then I suppose we're coming out through COVID. A lot of what the symptoms that I discovered afterwards, that likes of that brain fog, that being really tired. Also, and I know that it's been highlighted as well, is the lacking of confidence, of how you lose your confidence, which I didn't think was part and parcel of anything got to do with the menopause. And I blamed an awful lot of that down to COVID and the stress of COVID and trying to deal with, you know, as being self-employed and all of those issues on it, to go back in and sit down with my doctor and have a really good understanding doctor that said to me, you are going through the menopause, and we will, and took me through HRT treatment and the benefits of it. And I suppose the link 10 years ago to breast cancer, I mean, it was so much unknown about it. And once I went on to the HRT treatment, I have to say, I haven't really looked back. Every now and then, I know when I'm stressed, there's the lack of sleep, the waking up in the middle of the night, which before I went on to the HRT treatment was a big thing. That night sweats. I mean, you could have a shower 2 or 3 times in the middle of trying to sleep.
But I'm laughing there, Audrey, right? Because one of the funniest conversations, and anyone that's listening to this that knows me through our local club, any of the females in particular, who might have been around the pitch at this particular day will understand what I'm saying. One of the funniest conversations we had on the sideline of a match where all our daughters were playing, but we got caught up in this conversation. It was literally like a comedy show about, you know, the sweats, you know, losing your head, the whole lot. And we were belly laughing about it. And I suppose, you know, it showed as well, you know, that there is that need to talk about it. And, you know, jeepers, Audrey, you've had some journey through it. I consider myself very lucky. So far anyway, Audrey, I'll touch wood. I might learn to regret that statement. And I've endometriosis, so that comes with its own headaches. But thanks for sharing both your stories, ladies. Like, Kathleen, I want to come back to you again, right? Audrey listed some of the common symptoms, right? But I think one of the most difficult things that I have found is when I went to a doctor myself, they were saying, oh, you're not in the menopause. And I said, I know I'm not in the menopause, but I am definitely, if I'm not in the perimenopause, I'm not far from it.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes doing that blood test is not always going to show up that you're in the perimenopause. What is the difference for those that don't understand it? And I'm still learning. What is the difference between the in a really quick sentence? What's the difference between the perimenopause and the menopause itself?
Yeah. Well, in actual fact, there's very little difference in one sense. Perimenopause is seen as the stage before menopause, okay? And this is where all the trouble will start, to be honest with you. The body is beginning to reduce down its production of estrogen. The ovaries are beginning to shut down, basically. Body doesn't like that. The estrogen has over like a huge amount of other functions other than just in reproduction. And the body, all our body systems, most of them have estrogen receptors. And when the estrogen starts to drop, then where the body hates it, and that's why we get those symptoms. And the body is desperately trying to kick in, if you like, kickstart the ovaries to make more estrogen. So we get a whoosh up, and then we get a massive drop down again, and the body just can't keep that up. Okay, that all happens in perimenopause. Menopause itself is clinically decided. It's actually, would you believe, a one-day event. So it's a bit like your birthday. Okay, so happy menopause day, everybody. So what menopause is, it's actually, you can't know it at the time, but you look back and see. So once you're 12 months, consecutive months without a period, you're considered to be postmenopausal, and the last day of your period would be considered to have been your menopause. So in many ways, when we talk about being menopausal or in menopause, we're probably talking about the perimenopause area. So the reason why the blood tests don't pick up on it, and the guidelines from both the HSE and from the NHS, from the British Menopause Society, from all of the organisations, they would say that blood tests are not a good diagnostic tool for anybody in that perimenopause, in that normal transition. It's different if you have other reasons. For example, like Audrey, who went into early menopause because of her hysterectomy. Or what they would recommend that for women 45 and over, that the blood tests are not a good diagnostic tool. For that reason is that I could go in and have a blood done today and my ovaries are behaving themselves. I have buckets of estrogen, and my FSH, which is the hormone that stimulates the ovaries to produce estrogen, could be fine. What we're looking for in that picture is you're looking for a high FSH level, which is a follicle stimulating hormone, and this will encourage the ovaries to produce estrogen. So typical menopause pattern in blood tests will be high FSH, possibly normal estrogen and progesterone levels, or low estrogen and progesterone levels, okay? So that's what you'd be looking for, but you don't get that consistency in the perimenopause period. Now, for women younger than that, it is important to do blood tests, but to do them maybe every couple of weeks so that we have a pattern, okay? So that we can capture that. But really the diagnosis, and Audrey, I have to say you were very lucky that you had such a good tuned in GP, and because that's really fantastic. But the diagnosis of menopause should be made on symptoms and what you're suffering and what it is, and it's got nothing to do either with how regular or irregular your periods are, because people can be in perimenopause and still be having regular periods.
I think it's sorry, I was just going to say, I think it's the problem is that we don't fully understand what the full symptoms are. So if you're not getting, say, the night sweats, but you're getting other symptoms, I think it's fully understanding what they are. And I know Davina McCall has wrote a very good book, and it was a friend of mine that was actually reading down, and she was like going, oh my God, I've just ticked every one of these symptoms and I didn't realize this is what I was going through. And I would say that is the problem, and it's purely down to the fact that we don't talk about it, and we don't
like so many female issues.
Yeah.
I think back now, like I'm like you ladies, I'm self-employed, running a business, and I have obligations. But I think back to my grandmother's day, and who ran a big farm, had a big family, was widowed in her early 50s. And I often wonder how in the name of God did they just get on with it? They were hardy women, and it was a different time, I suppose. But I thought myself during COVID, I put everything down to COVID actually, because I started getting symptoms at 42 and 43, I think. And I thought it was exhaustion from COVID, because we were working incredibly at high pressure level. And I thought, okay, I'm absolutely wrecked. I didn't for a minute even consider perimenopause, you know. So I was completely in the dark, Kathleen. So I'm definitely a student in the making. Can I ask you, how can businesses, and how, actually two questions, how can businesses improve, Kathleen, the support, what can they do to support the females in the workplace? And the second question will be to you, Audrey. What do you think SMEs need as well? Because some SMEs are 1 people, 2 people shows, and then you have other businesses that are 10 plus employees. So Kathleen, the first question is to you. What can businesses do in-house to support their female staff who may be going through this or entering into it?
I think the first thing they can do is like what Audrey says, is to start the conversation. So get somebody, the likes of me, for example, but to start that conversation of what it is, to open up that conversation, so that women, because a lot of women, and it's something that I often hear back when I am in organizations, is it's like what Audrey said there, I have no clue that this is menopause. So there's no point in organizations just going in and saying, well, we're putting this in and that in. You know, if we need to start that conversation, how the women might be sitting there thinking, well, actually, that's what's wrong with me now. You know, I'm not going mad. I don't have dementia. I'm not suffering with arthritis. This is what I'm going to do. So the first thing I think to do is to start the conversation. And I have to say, in fairness to most of the organizations, that all of the organizations actually that I've worked with, they're absolutely brilliant for getting the ball rolling, getting as many people as they can, repeating that as well, and then taking it to the next level. The next thing that they can do then as well is to ensure that their line managers and supervisors are educated in this. And that's really important, because it's those people that might be responsible or see and note possible drop off in performance, that particularly the psychological symptoms, and particularly that whole idea of confidence and anxiety and decision making and brain fog and all that kind of thing, that they can recognize those symptoms, and also to kind of show them how to have that fairly delicate conversation, you know, that they might have to have, and to be able to let the person know that they're supported. Because what often happens that women in that our work, and 8 out of 10 women who are menopausal are working, so we form a huge part of the demographic, but 1 out of 10 of them will definitely leave due to symptoms, and I think 1 in 4 of them will consider leaving, and 8% of them will not go for promotion. So that's a huge effect on the workplace, and in terms of not just recruitment but also retention. So it's hugely important, you know, that we open up that conversation, that we're able to recognize what's going on, that our colleagues can recognize us, and then organizations can pinpoint to where the supports are. Now, some organizations will often be thinking, oh my God, I have to put in all sorts of things like everything there, but most don't have to. There's stuff that's there already. We just need to highlight it, you know, that is there to support. And it could be anything from a little bit of flexibility, maybe from working from home, or maybe a little bit of flexibility around break times, particularly if somebody's had a bad night and they haven't slept, maybe they need to come in and have a coffee earlier or something like that, right up to considerations around uniform, hygiene facilities, showers, changes of uniform if there's a uniform there, having period products available for somebody. And then, of course, the world's your oyster then with menopause policies and all sorts of looking for menopause-friendly accreditation and all that type of thing, you know. But the starting point is opening the conversation. Yeah.
And I think, you know, something, Kathleen, I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah.
It's learning to not be afraid to speak about it.
Yeah,
because no matter how, you know, kind of forward thinking and progressive we may assume we all are, and we are actively, a lot of us, there is still that piece in the Irish psyche that you don't talk about that. You can't be talking about these things. And I'm sure people will nod in agreement with that, and some people will give out about the talk that goes on about it. But I think it's a really important piece. So I think you're spot on with that. Audrey, from an SME owner perspective, what do you feel would support women in the workspace? You know, you have women on your own team, Audrey, at the moment. So do I. We're female-led businesses. So what do you feel would help?
I think, speaking as a female, I think it's more to having that conversation and nearly the willingness to talk about it, or to even just acknowledge it is a great thing. I know, like, as I was going through some of the symptoms, and I said it to my husband, and he broke his wrist, I think, somewhere in around it, and it was like, well, this is much more painful than it. You're kind of like going, like, because to some degrees it's like where you're trying to pin it down, and it's kind of like, why is this a problem? Like, Jesus, just go to bed early, or, you know, just go and see your doctor, or just, you know, whatever. And it's that thing of where I suppose you don't know what it is that you're going through, and it's having some sort of empathy or acknowledgement and understanding of it, and that your door is open and that you can come and discuss, this is what's happening to me at the moment. And, you know, I just don't know what's happening with me. And yes, I could be in bad form. And yes, I might snap the head off you, but just understand that I'm coming from a place that I don't understand. I think for me, that is the first point of call. And I have always had it and said it to my team that no matter, regardless of what's going on in their life, and I'm not just talking about that it would be menopause, but just what's going on in my life, you know, I've had an argument with himself and I'm in bad form. I'm just putting my head down, just leave me to it. I need to go to the dentist. This has happened. I think from an employer point of view, those are the benefits for any employee, and those are the benefits from a female point of view. And I mean, like, a woman with kids that comes in and an employer is afraid to ask her, do you have kids? That person is actually going to be so much more productive and so much more focused, because you have this thing of where I only have 2 hours to get this done. And you just, that's going to get done. When it comes into the menopause stage, it's that feeling of nearly you're going back where you feel like you're pregnant again. And you don't know what's happening with your body. It's just that understanding is what I think is the most important thing. Like, yes, as Kathleen said, there's other things there to have, but if you're having policies in place but they're not being followed, well, it's a piece of paper. That's all it is. It's needs to come down to just having the understanding, and allowing that somebody can have their doctor's appointments or have their hospital appointments, and that it's not, well, you can't, because for God's sake, what's wrong with you? Pull yourself together. It's just having those facilitating and conversations that it's normal. Half our population, if they're not going through this, then they're certainly going through periods. They're certainly going through possibly bad periods. They're certainly going through endometriosis. I mean, I had 2 employees that had that, and these things happen, but that's only doesn't define the person. It's not as if I'm in the midst of football training, or I'm need to go off early for a match, or I need to recover from a match, or whatever. It's something that's happening with our bodies, and we don't understand it. And
no,
to be
and if
open
we
to
don't
it.
understand it, I suppose it is very difficult for the men in our lives to understand it to a certain degree as well, like our husbands, our brothers, and sometimes our male colleagues and counterparts. But I think in the workplace, my own belief is that if you opt to include and employ, professional females, then you have an obligation to understand and empathize with them when it's needed within reason. And I think that's hugely important, because as an employee, and sometimes as a female in a high level position in an organization, you're nearly afraid to look anything other than superb and perfect and on the ball 24/7. So it is very important that there's a bit of understanding and nearly a conversation and a support piece there. And like you said, an open door policy, Audrey, which is brilliant that you have that. And likewise here, I'd say if there was a fly on the wall here in our offices, some days there's very little that isn't discussed at times. But I think it's very important as well that the likes of Kathleen and your services be considered for, not just the very large entities, but the medium size and the growing small entities as well that need that. Because the two things that are very paramount two of the things that are very paramount at the moment is talent acquisition and recruitment, and on the other side of it, retaining that talent in your business. So a large proportion of that will always be gauged, it's split between male and female. So you have female and male talent, and I don't ever distinguish between the two. I just say it's male talent. It's a level playing field. But to retain people, it's a key piece to retain. Would you agree with that, Kathleen?
Absolutely, yeah. And at the moment, any women that may leave the workforce because of being unsupported, if you like, through their menopause symptoms, at the moment they're leaving the workforce. They're not going down the road because there's another company will treat them better, but that will come. That will be one of the deciding factors of particularly when we're in high employment, of where that lady might decide to work, and that will be a recruitment kind of factor, if you like, going forward. It's not necessarily at the moment, but what can also happen then is, as well as leaving the workforce, they leave the workforce, and that can lead women back into the dark ages again, in that we could be talking low levels of poverty here, you know, for women, which we don't want to do. But there's no doubt, if we can, in order to retain staff, if we can support people, and a lot of the time, because a lot of women won't talk about this presently in the workforce, because we haven't got, as you say, that culture of talking about it. A lot of them will consider that it will be perceived negatively. And then the other side of them is to talking about that their ability to do their job is questioned. And they already are questioning their ability to do their job, you know, because of that lack of confidence and those psychological symptoms that they can come. So definitely a big factor if we can ease that way. And I suppose in one sense, we're very lucky we're having this conversation now before this all becomes part of employment law, which it will going forward. We've already have a lot of employment law around pregnancy, childbirth, and parenting. So this will be the next thing. It will come in at some stage. And isn't it great that we're doing that now because we want to, not until we're waiting when we have to, you know.
Yeah,
so
100%.
That's very positive here. Yeah.
I actually think that's really interesting, Kathleen, that what you're saying there. You know, that to think that a female would feel that they'd have to leave and possibly leave employment as opposed to a particular employer purely because that nobody understands what's going on, that the employer doesn't know how to support, which is just a conversation as far as I'm concerned, or at least leads and starts with a conversation. That's shameful that, you know, that could possibly and is possibly happening. I think, though, as an employee, and for any legislation that might come in, is all great. But as a self-employed person who becomes pregnant, who is going through all of these issues, there is no supports for us. And I don't even know, you know, what sort of supports can you put in place, but there is no support. There's no support when you're pregnant. The majority of females, if they're clever enough, I suppose, will consider actually becoming an employee and staying as an employee until they have their family, you know, because as a self-employed person, they're female, there's absolutely no supports there. You're trying to balance both and keep your business afloat, you know, when you're pregnant, when you have your child, you know, even in terms of child supports, you know, there's nothing, and it's a harder road for a female to actually go down. But to think that somebody
funnily enough, Audrey, there last week, I was asked to write a piece around SMEs for media, and that came into play. Actually, why do females opt for? A lot of females opt for the self-employment route, and is the grass always greener? Was what the question I was putting on the spot for them, like risk versus resilience. But there is no support, you know. At the moment, I have a fractured shoulder, but I'm grand. I'm flying it like the one-armed bandit here. But like once that happened to me, the business still has to go on. Clients still need to be looked after and cared for, and I'm very lucky that I have a great team around me. But in saying that, you know, that's another question altogether, and it does relate back to what we're discussing here, the menopause, because that's one area that the females in industry and in professions and in the corporate setting and in the SME space need support with. And that's something, you know, when the politicians come knocking on the door now, lads, for the general election, you know, I always say to any politician that comes to our door, if you can help us and support us, you have my vote. I am not a party politician, I am a person politician. So if that makes sense. But, you know, it's very difficult to see, and it is hopeful, I would hope there's more women in government now, and you would hope that would help change things in a positive manner and a more balanced manner, more than a positive manner, a balanced manner. And we do, you know, people in general deserve that support. It's not just women, but women don't seem to get the same piece of that pie, so to speak, in a lot of respects. So
I'll tell you, Mags, why I think that actually is, because you said it there earlier on. I think we're still in that generation of where we get on with it. We don't complain. We, we're not, well, I know I'm not, but I know of other women, we're not running to the doctor unless our limb has fallen off. We're not, we're not aware of it. It hasn't been spoken about. I know my grandmother certainly wouldn't speak about it. My mother didn't talk about it until I approached her with, loads of questions. And it's a different world that we're living in now. And thankfully it has been highlighted, but only recently, only in the last, couple of years. And
I think actually, Audrey, you touched on something there, right? Both of us have daughters, and I have normalized everything with my daughter that was never discussed with me. So, everything from, sex education to having your first period. And now she sees me at times, and I've often said to her, Freya, I'm just going through the change. Whereas when we were young, my mum, and I grew up in a house of boys, and like the boys would go to town on my poor mother, in a good way. And I would as well, I'd say, oh, another hot flush, mum, messing, just winding her up. But and like that, she's a lady. She never spoke about any of those things. I had to pull all that information out of her, in my sense. And her remark to me was, when I was talking about the symptoms, was, oh, she said, I just flew through it. I didn't even realize I was dealing with, and I started laughing to myself. But that's that generational piece. They're hard, they're hardy. They're like titanium women, I think, to be honest with you. But I do feel like we have an onus now with the future generations that we normalize this. We normalize it as something that's just part of life. It's conversation. It's not to be hidden under the carpet. It is to be dealt with, and it is to be just approached as another stage of life, and part of the life cycle for the female,
Yeah. I think that's exactly it. And it's not a case of, it's not a case of where you're looking for, I don't know, you're not looking for anything major. I'm not certainly looking for anything major. It's just that acknowledgement of it being a tough time that you're going through without anything else taking place in your life. It's a tough time. And I suppose just to be able to go through that change with some sort of dignity and respect,
come out
and
unscathed, Audrey. Come out unscathed. Kathleen, you're the woman that can help a lot of people to come out unscathed. So can you give us some tips just for, I suppose, individuals, but also for companies out there and SMEs, to help individuals get through this phase of their life in the workplace and also in their own personal life, but also for businesses that need to support the females? What tips can you give them?
Well, for the individuals, the first thing I would say is that if you are going through symptoms that may possibly be perimenopausal, and I would start to do a symptom tracker. I think that would be the best thing to do, and they can all be downloaded from the internet. I'm a licensed trainer with a group called Henpicked. I don't ask me where they got the name. But if you go onto their website, they have them. But anywhere, just Google menopause symptom tracker, and absolutely you'll get loads of them. They are hugely invaluable for the woman to get a hand or a grip on what are you actually suffering from, because a lot of the time, usually for most women, when they go looking for help, the first thing will probably be like what Audrey did, went to the GP, okay? And a lot of the time, where it's very emotional, we're probably at our wits' ends. We are emotionally drained. We're wrecked and tired and don't know what's going on. And you sit down, and your blood's come back normal, and you're sitting there crying at the GP, and you're probably maybe given an antidepressant, which may help in fairness, but you've been misdiagnosed. So what we need is ownership of that thing. So that's the first thing I would say to individuals: track your symptoms. Try it for a few months and see what you are. Are you getting hot flushes? Are you having night sweats? What is the brain fog like? What are your psychological symptoms in terms of anxiety? How is that affecting your life? So those are great things. And then go and look for ways. Now, when we do training within organizations to start that conversation, we will signpost different places to get help, from the medical, the complementary, lifestyle changes, and how to balance all that with mental health and well-being as well. So that's all part of that training. So so the starting point there is I suppose to take ownership of it, you know. So and to try and to get it together. What way is it affecting you?
And Kathleen, sorry for interrupting you for a moment. Do you provide that to, you know, smaller SMEs as well as large?
Yeah, I'll go and talk to anyone. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's that would be the point for the individual then, you know. My other bit of advice to individuals then is always kind of, you know, particularly if you're going down any of the routes, is to you know, be mindful. Everything nowadays now, because menopause is out in the open, and it's a marketeer's dream now. So it is, because you just put menopause on anything nowadays and promise the world. And just to be mindful of that, you know, if something is promising you that this will take away every symptom of menopause and you'll be like a 20-year-old again, you know, a little bit of caution. As I often say, open your eyes before you open your wallet, basically, and just be cautious around what's been offering, because honestly, we have menopause face cream, shampoos, underwear, we've all sorts of things now with menopause on it, and it costs a fortune. So just to be mindful there. For organizations then, I go back to what I said earlier, start the conversation and work from there, you know. And there's plenty of advice on what to do. And organizations, it doesn't have to be a massive big commitment in terms of money or time or anything like that. Just get started and let's see where that journey goes.
Okay, ladies, thank you both very, very much for sharing your stories. I do appreciate it.
Great advice there from Kathleen. Yeah, brilliant advice. Yeah.
And real life stuff. And look, we have to deal with real life stuff. It ain't the thing of dreams, but it is real. Ladies, thank you so much for taking your time. I hope that those of you listening have taken something from that, had a giggle along the way if you're like myself and the women here. And we will speak to you all next time.